So, if you're at the early service, that seemed a little bit like yesteryear, didn't it? Where we just, went a little bit longer and we just could hardly get things under control. Anyway. So, in that spirit,
Flashback Sunday.
well, so this is not really part of the theme of the class. But those of you who are old timers remember that for years we published a monthly newsletter titled Plantings. And then at some point, rising mailing costs, printing costs became excessive. And we had a hard, painful conversation about no longer mailing a paper newsletter out. In lieu of that, for several years, Carol would put plantings together electronically and send it out. So you didn't get it through the mail, but you could access it on your computer. So that happened sometime before COVID. It wasn't a casualty of COVID, it was a casualty of rising costs. So I was looking for a few things in the parish records, and I noticed that Carol had a stack of our last round of plantings in her storage area. And I thought to myself, I'm going to try and find the last one she sent out before COVID hit. So that this would have been the newsletter for March 2020.
If you ever want to know what he does in his spare time. Spare time.
Yeah. So, just some serendipitous tidbits. The Ash Wednesday offering that year, Susan, was for Hannah Pantry. And on Ash Wednesday, we gathered just under $1,000 for Hannah Pantry. This is the Ash Wednesday of 2020. Listen to the worship attendance figures. January 26th, we had 84 at the Saturday service. Last night we had 83, so it sounded an awful lot like what it used to be. Sunday morning we had 95. This morning I counted 97, if you include the choir members who escaped a little early. And I do.
You have to count them. They were there.
Listen to this number. We had 101 in Sunday school. That would include children, adults, and the 3 confirmation classes. I bet right now, if you look over in the children's Sunday school class, maybe we hit double figures, 10, maybe. Confirmation classes are holding up very well. When the pastor persecutes you, adult Sunday school holds up very well. Late service on that Sunday, 179. So those were the days. The offering was just under $12,000. So those are pretty common. Sunday school was big that day. The other Sundays were more in their 60s. But as far as Saturday night, the end of February, we had 118 people in the Saturday service. 118. It's been a long time. And the
COVID hit just right
Right.
then.
So I just thought those were interesting numbers to look at. The little girl who was baptized today, her big sister Olivia, was baptized at the end of February. And I'm sure that was the last baptism before COVID hit. We did have baptisms during COVID, but we did them very carefully. And for the very old timers, Martha Parker died that month, February 21st. So, anyways, those are interesting things to see. Harmony McElhatton played in Sister Act. We welcomed Samantha Steele into membership too. Same time their daughter was baptized. A few memories.
Well, we've lost a lot of intrepid worship attenders. in the
Yeah.
years since then.
Yeah,
too.
one of the reflections, I'll talk a little bit next time about some of the changes that we've seen through the years, as well as go through the rules with you. But, yeah, that we've become a much more adult congregation. The days of having 36%, we had in the first 10 years as high as 36% of our congregation were 16 and younger.
Well, you weren't sitting this morning, where Sue and I were sitting behind the baby. Entertained us all through church. Sure.
That's good. They were entertaining, and Piper is very entertaining.
She is very
Yeah, she is a Gerber baby.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
So last week, we talked some about events and activities. I didn't have a chance to really finish, but the congregation has always been very, very involved in service projects. So just if you can remember the old timers, you know, at one time this congregation filled 2 complete heifer project arcs. Do you have any memory of that? That means within a month's time, we collected $10,000 to fill an ark with animals, and we did that twice. It's still on the bulletin board in the Sunday school hallway, but when we were giving to the ELCA Malaria Fund, we were one of the top 25 givers in the whole country to ELCA Malaria Fund. That's remarkable.
And Tom Crape
For a
dressed up like a
congregation.
mosquito.
He did. According to Emma, who is our local Lutheran World Relief representative, Tree of Life still remains one of the top givers to Ukrainian relief. Some of that, I think, has to do with Demetrius and our love for him and wanting to respond to him. We've been involved in refugee resettlement. There's more than this, but actively involved in a family from Uzbekistan. Some of you may remember them. Somewhat less involved with a couple from Vietnam who actually ended up living with a friend of mine named John Durborough in that old farmhouse on Walker Mill Road that they restored and made look really nice. If you're familiar with Walker Mill Road, there's a big
Right across
farmhouse
from the
there.
playground.
Yeah, right across from the playground. It's a beautiful house now. It wasn't a beautiful house for years. It was John's home, and when he heard we were doing this, he housed this couple in the top floor of that house on our behalf. And then, most significantly, as you know, with the Sudanese community, it's now been over a 20-year partnership with the Sudanese community. So, and you remember that for quite a while, 8 of them, single, lived in the house up above the hill without knowing how to open a can, run a vacuum cleaner, do their laundry, and without the understanding that you need to hang your laundry out when it's wet and let it dry before you put it into a closet. That was a problem early on.
And not set the thermostat at 95 degrees so that you could dress like you did in Sudan.
We've been generous supporters of food banks, the Ecumenical Food Pantry, Hannah Pantry, Manna Pantry, the 2 packing programs run by the local school systems. We're the founding family of Tree for Hope and Hope Academy. Now we have Feeding the 5,000 going on every Thursday morning. These are just really, really significant ministries. So I guess what I'm saying to you is you ought to pat yourselves on the back. And this is not all about Kathy and me. It is about all of us together expressing Christ's love for our community. And don't look so pessimistic, it really is. I mean, how could we have done any of those things without the team? We have had massive seminarians here. Do you realize that? I mean, Shelley Huth goes to seminary while she's here. Jennifer Chris, now Jennifer Hope Tringali. Tracy Glover, Pastor Ekman's wife, and Karen and Anastasius' daughter, Elizabeth. Our son, Andrew. And most recently, Wendy Harrison has been taking classes, off and on for some time. And we did have one young man, Rob Kivlin, attend for a while, and I think he just decided, once COVID hit, that he had other things he had to focus on. Did I miss any of our?
Holly.
And Holly, that's right, and Holly.
I was still in seminary. when
That's true, Kathy was still in seminary.
When I was ordained, I was a member of the congregation.
So,
So,
back in the summer, I asked Carol to go through 2 large parish records and count pastoral acts. So by the time we leave, we will have had officiated 226 weddings. Funerals, 381. Baptisms, 504. Did you count the 2 today?
Yes.
Yeah? And confirmations, 387. So that really is, it's just a wonderful legacy. So, and I don't think Carol has our last couple funerals. I actually, believe it or not, have 2 already. Did you count the 2 that are yet to come?
Not the ones that are yet to come.
Yeah, we have one on Saturday now and one the last week in the office. So that's a lot of activity. So you'll add your stories to this mix, and hopefully you'll have time to do that. But let me tell you some of the interesting people stories about Tree of Life. When I talked about the property, I told you about this old man, Charlie Miller, who when we started the congregation was just such a good friend to Kathy and I. Fix-it man, could repair everything. I can't repair anything, and so when I have a problem, he'd come to the house and fix it. He helped me build a garden. Just can't tell you how many things he did for us and for the church before he died. I told you he was the guy who rode his electric wheelchair down the road from Pheasant Hill Estates and parked it here every day the building was going up. So he came inside when they were putting that ceiling in. Some of you may recall this story in a sermon years ago. And after the ceiling was finished, at some point he caught me in a private moment, and he said, you know, PG, someday you're going to be working in the worship space and you are going to hear something like a shotgun going off. And if you hear that sound, you are to get on the floor as fast as you can. And he told me that he had watched them put the ceiling in, and that in the back corner where Dan is at,
Run,
you
Dan,
really
run.
want to duck.
Now I'm worried.
I know. So in the back corner, they made a mistake when they cut a piece of wood. And rather than taking the whole board down, they fixed it by cutting a splinter of wood roughly a foot long and wedging it in the gap and staining it so it just looked like the wood. Years and years later, I am in the worship space and the shotgun goes off and the building settled and that piece of wood came shooting out of the ceiling. So you can't see it now because the building settled and it covered up the mistake. But I should have kept the splinter of wood for you, Dan.
You're okay, Dan.
Church want any hard hats?
Easter Sunday, 1991, we are in the cafeteria at
Herbert Hoover
Herbert Hoover
For
School.
those of you who are young, it's Thomas Holtzman.
Anybody at Easter Sunday 1991 yet?
Is that the altar, time the altar was gonna get moved around? Go ahead.
No? Nobody?
I was.
Hot dog buns.
What's
Is
that?
that the hot dog buns?
That was the hot dog buns.
And I was presiding.
The person who was to bring the communion bread forgot. And this is before a 24/7 giant food store. And so the only place that was open was that Unimart or whatever it was at that time on Front Street. So Kathy, thank goodness Kathy, distributed hot dog buns.
And if you know Andy Hurry,
Yes.
he came around and said something incredibly humorous as I was doing it. And it took me like, we were doing it in a circle, and it took me like a couple of circles before I could control my laughter.
Some of you remember Carl Brandt, Sandy Brandt's
Yes.
husband. Carl was a huge member, big, physically big, charter member, older than Sandy. They got married during a church service out at Camp Sertoma. We had a wedding in the Sunday morning service. And Carl, when we moved into the building, became literally the candy man. He would come to church with pockets filled with candy.
And speaking of Dan, that's where he sat.
Is that where Dan is at? And he would distribute candy to all the kids. It became a problem. Parents were not always grateful for all the candy. And more to the point, candy wrappers everywhere in the building after church. And it was Carl Brandt. We had another Carl by the name of Carl Deerdorf, who was go ahead.
I have some Carl Brandt stories.
Go ahead, tell one.
Just one.
Yes. Yes.
So, during a sermon at one point, you were talking about being humble, and you said something about him not being humble, I think. So Christmas Eve, he wore a tie that says, "I am humble."
I have no memory of that. I do have a memory that when he died,
Right, that's
you tell it.
So, when he passed away, it was like, I'm thinking spring or.
It was May.
It was May.
And we got, all of our kids wanted to come to the service and for his funeral. And, he had purchased every stuffed animal they had left over at Christmas from, I don't know, Farmore or one of those kind of stores. And at the end of the service, the kid, I don't know where they were during.
We did a
service.
children's sermon and handed
Yeah,
them out.
and then they passed, you could go pick a stuffed animal. It was a winter stuffed animal, but the kids didn't mind, they loved them. I mean, for a long time, we had those.
It was May because he died. Sandy found him dead in bed when we were at
No, at
the
the front
Granite
door.
Hill. Granite Hill, at the front door of the
Front
Granite
door.
Hill Bluegrass Festival. So we came
So
up with
I just knew it was not Christmas.
You remember that?
that. Yeah.
We got called backstage.
Carl Deerdorf was another Carl. He was our first Sandy Brand, our financial secretary, when we lived in our home. And we did have an office in our home with a separate entrance, but Carl was a night owl. He didn't function during the day. And so he would come and do all the financial work on the computer in the first floor of our house
Right below our
while we
bedroom.
were in bed. It was disconcerting. We did some incredibly touching things, and one, if you've never read Yvonne Esworthy's profile on the hall going down there on the left, Yvonne was a Susquehanna University grad, our finance committee chairperson, a mother of one who desperately wanted to be a mama of two. And so she postponed, I think, chemotherapy because she was afraid it would prohibit her getting pregnant again. And didn't that darn cancer come back and became all-consuming, and she died. And so she was beloved of the congregation. Her visitation was miles and miles long.
Round, around,
And
outside.
she had so many friends here that we decided we would not let her body lie by itself.
It was
And
right
so,
there.
do you remember a couple dozen of our members kept vigil through the night from Sunday, or was the service on Sunday? I think it was on Sunday. At any rate, they kept a watch through the night with her body in vigil. Just a very touching moment. Nearby, you will see some posters on the wall or photographs about our choir's visit to Carnegie Hall. If you were a member of the choir years ago, we had one of those golden moments where our choir members could sing in Carnegie Hall with several other church choirs, so they all remember that. Kathy recalled little Jessica Christ being asked a question,
The children's sermon.
children's sermon, about what she wanted to be when she grew up. Her answer was Jennifer Bedford.
She was going to grow up to be Jennifer Bedford. And Jennifer was just a few years older than her, but it was just such an example of the way our older kids took care of our younger kids during church. It was just beautiful.
So, you know, things like that became also part of the thought in Vacation Bible School, which of course Kathy organized every year, in taking groups and not pulling them in age groups, but putting them in mixed groups.
Family
Where the
groups.
older children helped the younger children, and the younger children came to admire the older children. So, I would just say to those of you who have opportunities to advocate for that thought in the future, maybe you would do that, because there was a huge benefit to that, mixing the kids up. We had a year when we had 5 consecutive baby boys born. And we wondered if we'd ever have a girl in the congregation again. And we named them anybody remember? The Fab Five.
Because that was the time in basketball when the Fab Five.
In the University of Michigan.
And it was,
So the 5 were Alan Runquist, who moved away years and years ago, Sam Adams, who no longer is around, Troy Ridgely, Andrew Cromer, and Austin George. They were the
Tony Clark
Fab
was one of
5.
them.
Was he?
yeah,
Oh.
you goofed with one. I don't think it was Troy. I think it was Tony.
wasn't a member yet.
What?
Tony wasn't a member yet.
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I
For
think
some
those
reason,
were
I
the
was thinking
5.
it was Tony Clark, but.
Yeah,
no.
nope, they were all in
Then
the
it was
book.
Troy, yeah.
Yep. We had a wonderful Christmas Eve children's sermon a few years ago when Holly directed. Do you remember all the youth group led it? Bohemian.
What year?
I don't know, I always share it.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Bethlehemian.
Bethlehemian Rhapsody.
Rhapsody.
2 Bohemian Rhapsody.
Hysterical.
It was great.
So good. It was incredible.
When we left Herbert Hoover School in 1990 to go out to Camp Sertoma, we had a procession with balloons and clowns. Some of you may remember that. Sometime after we moved into the building, Kathy would argue that she preached
I did.
the most famous sermon ever preached
Oh,
at
that
Tree of
one. I
Life.
thought you were talking
Murmur,
See?
When she told the story of a failed camping adventure that we had in Connecticut.
Oh, Lord.
When we camped in a campground.
Anthony.
When it rained every day, and there was an Italian family in the tent next to us, and they had a very belligerent, troublesome child named Anthony. And we heard one word every day, over and over. Anthony!
Well, and it rained, and rained, and rained. We slept in water.
During, as we did a wedding, we also had a couple funerals that we did during church sermon services. On a Sunday morning, we put the funeral into the service. Why did we do that? Because the person we were remembering and eventually burying really had no family beyond the church. And so it was really the best way
Just
to
her
do it.
daughter.
And so we did it twice. We did it with Jay Rao's grandma, Laura Purcell, and then we did it for a woman named Christine Popkins, who was the mother of Tina Walk. Kind of remember the Walks. And Christine was from the South, I think from Virginia, I don't remember, but she had to be one of the sweetest persons ever, so during the church service. We've had some interesting confirmation classes through the year. What else could you say? But we had our most interesting, I would say, in 2002. This was the class of 25. It was such a big,
My kids were in that
Don't admit it, Tim.
That's true.
Don't admit it.
Dustin and Amanda were both in that class.
George
Zach-
Reese's too.
Zach Weinmeier, Sean Dries, oh, I can name all of them.
Jimmy
The Hurry Boys.
Emily was in it.
Yeah,
Emily was
Emily,
in that
the
class.
girls, there were 6 girls, and they were quiet.
They were the only ones that were.
They were
quiet.
the
There were
only
19
ones.
boys, and none of
19
them were
boys
quiet.
and 6 girls. 19 active
They were
boys.
the
So-
only
They were
ones
smart,
that we had
too.
to have parents stay.
They sat in that section, right there.
Well, I had
We
them in the
parents.
treehouse basement.
Yeah, Kathy did, but when I taught them, they sat there and we had parents come in and supervise.
But just a little tidbit. I had them by myself. And I had a massive headache after class every Sunday. And he would say to me, well, next year when I have them, they won't be a problem. The very first Sunday, he had that sign-up list for parents.
This is why I'm telling the story. Along with Charlie Miller, who desperately wanted to live long enough to make it into the building, and he did. We had another lady who joined the church when she was critically ill of cancer. Her name was Sally Perrine. She lived out in Fishing
Potato
Creek
Valley.
Valley, Potato Valley Road. I met Sally, they came to church, she told me about her cancer. Eventually, I was communing her at home, but she really hoped to hang on long enough to make it into the building, and she did. She died in 1992 on February 9th, so we were in the building
Just a short time.
about 3 months before, well, not even 3 months before she died. She dies on February 9th. We have her funeral on February 13th. We're over there enjoying a hospitality lunch, which again is one of the great things. I'm telling you, this is one of the few congregations that can still get enough people together to host a meal after a funeral. Very few of my peers in ministry in the Harrisburg Conference do that anymore. But we're able to do that because of the generosity and commitment of a group of people. So we're over there eating the hospitality lunch, and the phone rings, and it is Bob Barry telling me that his daughter Madeline was just born at the old Polyclinic Hospital. So here we are remembering this blessed woman, Sally Perrine. She's buried out in Fishing Creek Valley Road in the same cemetery that Yvonne Esworthy and Jeff Bedford
Yeah.
are buried at. That's
Beautiful,
how we learned about
beautiful
it.
little cemetery.
Yeah. Anyways, telling us that Madeline had been born. And so I left the funeral lunch, greeted the family, and drove down to Polyclinic Hospital. And I am telling you, I got to see Madeline Barry as a baby, and Lisa still had the sweat on her brow. I mean, literally, that's how soon. I've always found that to be such a great thing. So, and Madeline and this Jennifer Bedford, whose little baby will be baptized at the late service, became best friends. They are still best friends. They went every summer to Camp Nawaqua together.
In the first year.
The first year, they were so teary-eyed. Kathy, were you there that week too? Okay, I know Kathy was. They cried the whole time.
They were with us the
No,
whole
they
time.
weren't with me, they were with you.
They were with me.
They needed their mommy.
Yeah. I'd have one on each side of me.
And they didn't brush their hair the whole week. So their hair looked like bird's nests, and they had long hair.
Well, and we do have to say that the first time Betsy stayed in a cabin as opposed to with us in Tozer, we realized about the third day or the fourth day that she was wearing the same outfit she had worn every day. So that's just what happens at Camp Nawaqua. It's okay. But her hair was perfect. They did hair.
We finally get to the end of the week. It's Saturday, and we got the two girls through the week. They made it the whole time. Bob and Lisa pull up in the Walkwest parking lot, and I'm there, I'm waiting for them. And the side of the van door opens, and this little dog, Madeline's dog, Cricket, jumps out of the side of the dog. That dog must have intuitively
Yeah,
knew
where she
that
was.
Madeline was a quarter mile away.
In a cabin. yeah.
There was no hesitation. That dog jumped out and shot across that common area in the lower camp, charged into Madeline's arms. This is like Romeo and Juliet. It was so crazy, emotionally laden, and just embracing each other.
And they came back every year after that.
So,
Well, the other tough handoff was Kim Weinmeyer. Charlie and Lena were there for hours.
Oh,
trying,
yeah.
trying to convince her to stay. And, you know.
We won't tell you about
our-
Andrew's experience
our-
last year.
But our daughters were there and.
Yeah,
and,
they were always together.
you know, Betsy and Jess got each other. Yeah.
They got each other through it, yeah.
That little dog, Cricket, the day Cricket died, Bob called me, and I was in the office and said, PG, can you come up, Madeline's here, and have a prayer with her and I and Cricket before we take Cricket off to the vet. So that little dog, I got to see that happy moment, and at the end of his life, I got to bless the dog before Cricket was put down. It was really a powerful moment. Our first death was an old woman named Helen Warden. You don't remember her probably. She died on, ready, December 23rd, 1988. So she was a charter member, had no family in the area. Vaughn Miller literally called me and said, can you come out to Helen's place?
But that woman found, who, I
So,
can't remember her
a
name.
cleaning
Karen?
lady, I think.
No, she was coming to church.
It wasn't
She-
Rebecca.
It wasn't Rebecca? I thought
No.
she found her.
No, I think it was a
Okay.
cleaning lady in Helen's apartment. But Rebecca Curley, who was an early member of the church, they only were here a year.
Well,
so
she
they
hadn't
knew.
heard from her or something, and maybe she called.
She
yeah.
did, she
Yeah.
went to, she was one of the few people at the graveside service up in, I think up in Perry County, and I just remember it was bitterly, bitterly cold, and you had this old woman being buried and this young woman who was like among 3 or 4 of us there to remember her. It was very touching. Our first baptisms happened on February 14th. Anybody remember the first ones, 1988?
Yeah.
So one was a high school kid, Greg Maldonado. His parents were on the service
he was in
committee
middle
together,
school.
maybe middle school. Jennifer Parks, she was probably a high school
She was in
student.
high school, she was 16.
And Charlie Miller. He wasn't baptized. So we baptized Charlie to bring him into membership. His godparents were John and June Arndt at the time. So they were like in their 60s when they served as Charlie's godparents. The first baby that we baptized came about a month later, and that was Zach Weinmeyer. I say he was a baby, but Zach was never small.
No.
Meaning both of us were holding an end of Zach.
They're such nice.
Yeah.
I think Adam Bell was our first Eagle Scout. When you come into the office building, you ought to walk by all those seashells. That was his Eagle Scout project. And the seashells came from an older man. Some of you remember Dirk Carpenter, lifetime seashell collector. After a busy service, I went over to the office and I found like 20 big boxes in front of the front doors, and I said so many swear words. I couldn't get in the building. I had to move all those boxes, and then when I got them moved out of the way and decided, I figured they were clothing, boxes of clothing. And I looked inside and I thought, seashells. What are these seashells?
We did so many vacation Bible school art projects with seashells. You would not believe.
We formed the Cub Pack Troop in 1995 and the Boy Scout Troop in 1997. So, what stories do you have? Those are some of mine.
Since food is so much a part of our life, can you let the newcomers know what it is like to have communion with garlic bread.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thanks, Dave. That was another service I presided at.
That was Christmas Eve.
It
I
was
think.
it was Christmas Eve, and it was, the bread package was labeled wrong. It came from Giant, and it was labeled kosher Pariv, like a lot of ours were. It gets put on the altar. I'm up behind there, and I could smell it. It literally was filled with garlic cloves, like this size. There was hardly a bit of bread that wasn't around. I had a pile, there was a pile this high of garlic cloves on the paten when I was done giving communion. And I think somebody may have actually gotten a garlic clove with their bread and told me about it. But, oh my gosh, yeah, it was pretty potent.
They didn't sit near Dave.
Dave doesn't
Oh,
like garlic.
Believe me, I think I had one of the clothes.
Yeah, did you? Well, and another year, it was raisin bread, and they were these big, fat, juicy raisins inside. It was like, that was a little better than the garlic cloves, but,
At least the microphones didn't run away from raisin bread.
yeah. Oh my, the things we do. Yeah.
We should say something about our kids. I brought a page out of the 2011 directory. We had a 3-time PIAA triple jump champion at Tree of Life. That was Rhonda Whitmer. Do you remember the farm family from Liverpool? For a while, we had the PIAA girls soccer scoring champion at Tree of Life. That was Jessica Shirk. And then later, we had the PIAA girls lacrosse scoring champ. That was our
Alexandra.
lovely vocalist, Alexandra
Stamba.
Williams. Yeah.
Williams, yeah.
So Jessica won a couple Division III
Well,
soccer championships
well,
at
national.
Messiah. Yep, at
National
Messiah.
champions.
Yep. We had a long time, we had really good young adults who were really good at spelling. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
We had Pennsylvania Spelling Bee Championships,
We
so.
went to the national championship.
Well, Justin Geis was
He was the first one.
Yeah.
And then Charlie Allegar. And then Charlie Allegar was so charming that at the national championship, we found Charlie on CNN, MSNBC, just charming everybody. He didn't win, but boy, he was.
He won Pennsylvania though, 3 years straight.
He did win Pennsylvania.
And then his brother Daniel won in 2009. So my note in the directory, we may be the best spelling congregation. We've had pastors, members here, we've had lots of PKs, pastors' kids, still have lots of PKs who are members at Tree of Life. So
John Cromer.
Cromer is back there, is among them.
Both of
Anybody?
us.
What's-
Toppings?
Yeah, Corin
Topping,
Topping,
Dick
Carolyn
England
Parson,
is
Heather
the-
Allegar,
yeah.
Cheryl Alteris,
Yeah.
Debbie Norcross,
Oh, okay.
the Rooming Girls, who's that?
Dick
Dick
England.
England
He
was
was
your
your
pastor.
pastor, yeah.
He was one of my favorite pastors.
He's a member of
ever.
St. James now. He's just, yeah.
Dave was Bob Jubilier's chief of staff at the time of this yearbook.
He wrote his speeches.
Keldine Stearmole was the mayor of Paxtang at that time. Ford Thompson is still the president of the
Central Dauphin School Board. Forever.
Any other stories that you have to tell?
Well, and Ford's one daughter was a long-time executive director for the, it became Pennsylvania Media, but it was the
Terry
Yeah,
Henning.
newspaper.
Terry Henning,
Yeah.
she was in church this morning. Yep, Karen has one.
Just the fact that we allow our choir members to sit with our families. even
Oh, yeah.
though it's a really big deal.
That was a big decision early
Yeah,
on.
and just for people who are, have a family or have little people that want to go sing in the choir, it just made it so reasonable to be able to be part of
Yeah.
a choir. And both of you are a choir
Yeah.
for all these years.
Well, and my dad, who could never be a part of the choir for some obvious reasons, if you ever sat next to him. But my parents were charter members. They died as members of the congregation. But that was one of my father's favorite things, was the fact that the choir got up during the hymn of praise or whenever, and went up and sang, and then came back and sang amongst the congregation and really helped to provide support. So, yeah.
So, there was a gentleman, Harry Meyer.
Oh, Harry.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
You tell it. You remember
Well,
it?
what you told us is that he was not happy with children taking up communion.
The offering.
The offering.
And then, I don't know who it was, which child it was.
It was a Bedford child.
He told me that he wasn't
Nicky?
happy with that and felt that the offering would pick up if we had strong men collecting the offering. He was an older man,
Yeah.
very generous, incidentally.
Very loud.
And big
He was a
voice.
Norwegian.
And so, but he was sitting on the end of the third pew
Mhm.
from the back, and the Bedford family were sitting right in front of them, and all these little girls. And you remember Samantha, if you remember when she was a little girl, she'll be
Was
here in a
Samantha,
minute.
okay.
She
Is that
would
there?
always take her shoes off and
Well,
keep
they
the
all did.
shoes out in the narthex and stay in the church service in her bare feet. So,
She handed
she
him the
helps
plate,
collect
yeah.
the offering, the Bedford family, the little girls, and it comes time for the peace, and she leaves her pew and turns around, and who's there but Harry? And we have a photograph of this, of little Samantha lifting up her hand to shake
Shake his
Harry's big hand. He was a big man.
He was over 6 feet tall and.
A couple
yeah.
weeks later, I go to see him at his retirement community, and eventually he says, "Pastor Geib, I made a mistake. Let the children collect the offering." So that was a great story. I'm glad you remembered it.
One of the questions that I asked your dad during the 9 hours was about his favorite hymns. And so there's a whole section about his love of church music.
Oh, he loved it. He loved to
Yeah.
listen to it.
Yeah.
Just couldn't sing.
He had over his years, if he forgot to turn off his microphone, there were numerous people who would want this.
So we got to stop because we got the
Yeah.
baptismal family coming in. But next week, I'm going to talk about some of the changes I've seen in over 30 years in the church here. And then we'll go through the rules of engagement. Kathy told
Disengagement.
her group on Saturday, and I guess they asked her how she was feeling, and Kathy said to them, "Richard and I are sad." So we are sad.
Very sad.
It's hard for us to get through things when folks say, "Oh, this is your last." And so, for the past couple weeks, everything is the last. It's the last property committee meeting. It's the last council meeting. It's the last home visit with people we have.
Visiting forever.
That's hard.
It is.
Yep. But you understand.
Well, it's mixed emotions for all of us too, so,
I know.
that is definitely reciprocated, and, it's like the old joke that's no longer politically correct, but the old definition of mixed emotions was watching your mother-in-law drive your new Cadillac off a cliff.
Leave
Yeah.
it to Dave.
It seems like you'll have a conversation with Dave later in the day. Yeah, because we know you never do. Put the chairs back, everyone. Gotta have court with that little note.